I just want to show you the bottom because I'm quite happy with the crust on there. If you listen, you can hear that hollow sound as you tap it. And that's telling you it's got a good crust and there's air inside. Today we're going to make sunflower seed and flax sourdough bread. We will need the following ingredients: 1 cup of milk, 1 tablespoon of honey, half a teaspoon salt, 2 tablespoons sunflower seeds, 1 tablespoon flax, 1 cup Next Gen pizza and pasta double O flour, 3/4 of a cup of our sourdough starter, 3 tablespoons butter. For our first step, I'm going to heat up the milk with the honey in a pot. I want them to get to the point of boiling. I do not need to boil them for any period of time. As that comes to temperature, in my mixing bowl, I am going to put my dry ingredients. So in goes the flour, the flaxseed, sunflower seed, and the salt. Reserve the butter for the next step. You don't want to add it too early because it's going to inhibit the stretch that we're getting from heating our milk and adding that to our flour. Our milk has now come to the boil. We don't need to boil it any longer. We just needed it to get that hot. Boiling hot and into our mixer. I'm just scraping in everything I can so that I'm not missing any of my milk. I'm going to put the mixer on. I've got my dough hook on here, and I just let it mix together. Let the machine do the work for you now. Let's have a quick peek at what has happened. So in the mixing bowl, you can see that all of our flour has been mixed with that hot milk. It is still very hot, and so we're going to let it mix until it starts to cool a little. In that period of time, in a couple minutes, we'll add the butter and let it stir the butter in as well. I'm adding my butter. First, I let this mix a little bit until I started to see the dough hanging onto the hook and sort of stretching like that. That's what you want to see. That's a good sign. Now the butter can go in, because as butter is a shortening, although we don't have gluten and it won't shorten the gluten strands, we do want to get the dough to completely emulsify and start to hydrate before we add our fats, or butter in this case. I'm going to let the mixer stir that in, and then we need to mix it until it's cool enough to add the yeast. That can take a little time because our milk was boiling hot, but it'll be worth the wait. Just scraping down the sides one time, just to help it mix in. Just giving a good check to the dough. The butter seems to be melted in. We're going to let this mix a little longer, but first I want to get to the bottom of the bowl and make sure that all the dough that was sticking around the edges is going to be able to be mixed in. This is how our dough is looking now. It's had a couple minutes to mix, and I'm just checking the temperature. I'm always coming back and checking the temperature because I want the temperature of the dough to be the same temperature as my hand. That's the best temperature for yeast. Too hot, yeast will die. Too cold, and it will grow very, very slowly. So I'm gonna scrape this down one more time. Our dough is almost there. Just gonna let it mix for about a minute more, and then we'll stir in our sour. One more time, just checking that dough. It's almost exactly the same temperature as my hand. I don't feel any heat coming out of it when I touch it, so that is a good sign. That's exactly what we want. Now we're getting back to our sour. So this is 3/4 of a cup that we pulled from our sour starter, and we are going to add this to our dough. Now the yeast that's in here is going to have lots of food to get at. It's going to get in there and start to grow again, start to multiply. So let's mix that in and then see have a look and see what the texture of the dough looks like then. Just to be sure it's well mixed, we're going to go around it once with our spatula and just check that it's mixing all the way to the bottom of that bowl. It looks well mixed, but 1 minute of mixing more, just to be sure. The dough looks like a very good consistency. I'm gonna take it off the mixer so we can look at it closely. So you can see it has a bit of stretch. It does stretch and pull before it drops off of the spoon. It's softer than it was because when we added the sour was quite nicely hydrated and gave our dough a little bit more moisture. We want to let this proof one time or rise one time. So we're going to wrap it up and put it in the fridge to chill and proof overnight, and then tomorrow we shape our loaves. So we pulled our dough from the fridge, and as you can see there's a nice rounding to the top. I'm going to take my cling film off so we can have a look at that. That means it's had a chance to proof. So as soon as it's proofed, you can take it out of your refrigerator. I'm going to just put a sprinkle of flour on it, and then I'm going to pull it out and put it on the table. Pardon? So another sprinkle of flour on your table. You can use a spatula or a pastry scraper. I'm going to just get all of that. We're going to give it a quick knead, and then we're going to divide it, shape our loaves, and get to the proofing. As you can see, the dough, I want to get a good dust on there so it's not sticking to my hands, although it's not a terribly sticky dough. So that's nice to work with, right? Like that. Pushing out some of the bubbles that are in there, almost all of them. You will likely have to reflour your table as you're going because the dough will pick up some of that flour on the table. And if your dough gets a little stuck, a pastry scraper, a spatula, something under there, just to get the dough off the table so you can continue kneading it. And as you can see, I'm not putting a lot of heavy arm work into this. I'm just giving it a fold and turn so it can pick up a little bit of flour, and I can push out all the bubbles that had formed in the refrigerator. Now I'm kind of happy with that. See? It's come together. It's nice to touch. I'm going to divide it in half. Approximately half. There we go. So my plan is to make one bowl, one round, and put it in my basket. And the other one I'm going to turn into a loaf. So I'm going to shape that as a sort of a demi-baguette size. Although it's not a true baguette texture, this one's a little bit softer than that. So for my bowl meaning bowl, I'm just shaping this as a round, giving it another knead. All the folds are kind of towards me here, and that's okay. Now, you can see it's got a nice shape here, nice and smooth, no cracks running through it. That's going to be the top of the bread later. So this area here is not heavily floured, so I'm going to use that to just give a little bit of a pull to my bowl shape. You see how it's stretching the round and it's a little bit taller than it was? That's exactly what we want for this. It's got a nice little shape. Not like this one is still kind of flattened out. So I'm going to pick that up, put it over here, give it a generous dust on top. Then I'm going to get my basket ready. I have a bread basket under there, a banneton. You can use any sort of container that will give you the shape that you want for your bread. I have a linen napkin in here. Use a fresh tea towel, flour generously so that your bread won't stick to this cloth. But the cloth is going to help us turn it out later, so it's very useful. So this is the top of my bread. It's going to go down into the basket or banneton. You can sprinkle the back side with something a little bit more rough. I'm using the millet meal. If you have a little cornmeal, that would work too. Or you can just reflour it with more of the flour for dusting. Then we wrap it up. And this one is ready for proofing. Just gonna put that to the side. And then we'll shape this other half into our loaf. The process is the same. Just want to give it a quick knead. Make sure the dough is giving you a little stretch as it folds and rolls. And now you can see it's sort of shaping as a round. Now I'm just going to roll it like a log, and I'm going to want to get to the approximate length of my sheet tray. And you can see I'm using my fingers here to give the little cracks at the side a quick pinch, just so I get a good form. And now I'm angling my hands this way because I don't want to give it a real baguette shape, but I do want the sides to come together and close up the little tiny cracks that were there. And so as I do that, you can see it's kind of like a very large olive. And then I can, from the center, start to even that out without the sides being cracked open. If you want to leave it like this, I love this shape. It's kind of one of my favorites. It's a simple sort of demi-baguette or batard type of shape. And that gets a generous dusting on top. Remember, this top here is going to go downward onto our tray, and that will stay as the top of our bread. I'm going to flour the fabric here so that I can lay my loaf downward onto that flour. And then just give it a quick wrap up. Now these can proof in a nice warm place in your kitchen. Our bread has been proofing for 45 minutes to an hour. You're going to find a nice place for it, and then when you do, come check on it, and you should see that your breads have started a little rising. And so I'm just showing you the back of the bowl has actually puffed up round, and it's become, because that side was a little bit more flat when we looked at it before the proofing. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm actually going to place this right onto my pizza stone. We'll take care of the loaf in a second. Because I want to be able to put this onto my pizza stone in the oven. If you don't have a pizza stone, heat up a cookie tray and leave it in the oven. My oven is at 375, and I have a pot of boiling water that I'm putting in with the breads to create some steam in my oven. If you have a fan in your oven, please use the fan. That will give you nice coloring. So to score this, I'm not going to cut too deep. I'm actually just using my little paring knife, and you can too. Or if you have a razor or a lame, then you go ahead and use that. I'm going to go ahead and give this not too deep of a cut. I'm going to just be symmetrical here. Very simple scoring, but that means it will open up. It's going to give the bread some room to spread out. I'm going to take this and put it into the oven. Be right back. For our next bread, we have our long loaf. So I'm going to pick up the whole fabric. You see, I put my hand under there because that helps me support it without it breaking on us. And if you're not used to moving bread around yet, that's no problem. use the towel, the tea towel you have it on. And remember, the side that was down on our tea towel with the flour is the side we're gonna have as our up side. And I'm gonna give this a quick score. If you don't sort of know what you're gonna do, it's okay to draw it out on a piece of paper so you have an idea. I'm gonna score this just across on the angle, and I'm gonna give it 1 or 2 little cuts there. It's gonna give it a chance to open up. And so I'm gonna take this one now as it's ready and put it in the oven just like the bowl. Here we are, the breads have come out of the oven. They're still warm to the touch. I don't wanna slice them just yet. You really need to let them cool. Then you can slice them and enjoy them. They smell delicious. You can see we've got lots of color, lots of crusting on them. When you pick it up, you'll hear this hollow kind of sound when you tap. The bottom of them have a good crusting as well. Some of the simpler cuts are gonna be the best at the beginning when you're just getting used to slashing, but this gives our bread some space to grow. The temperature we bake this at is 375 in the oven on a pizza stone that was already in there hot. If you don't have a stone, use a baking tray that you put in there and let it get hot, and then place the breads on top of it. These bake for 50 minutes, and I also put in the oven a small pot of water that was at the boil. Just put it in underneath to create steam in that oven. All right. The bread is a nice temperature for slicing now. I don't feel any heat coming off of it anymore, and I'm going to just break into here. I do wish you could smell the bread. Now it's time for me to try it. It's crusty on the outside. It holds the butter beautifully. The bread, the texture, the flavor, pardon me, I'm talking with my mouth full, but it's kind of exciting. It's got a mild sweetness, and it just has this beautiful texture, and it tears so nicely. I am super excited to cut the bowl because the loaf has come out beautifully and it all smells and tastes so good. Gives you that old European style and smell of bread. Since I've really missed the crusty end, I'm gonna butter this one up for myself. It is an absolute pleasure to eat the crusty piece of bread that has baked and has that nice caramelization on it.